about today is, first of all, an environmental scan. That means we're going to briefly discuss what's happening around us. And then we're going to proceed to an internal scan, discussing what may be going on inside of us. The crux of our discussion is how to bring about a wisdom culture amidst a society that is very complex and sophisticated, yet many are wondering, where is the real intelligence? And perhaps a different kind of intelligence is needed in order to deal with the complex and deep problems of the day. When we look at the world, let's say in 1900, only 10% of the population lived in cities. Now, it's about 50%. And then, by the middle of this century, 2050, it's estimated that 70% of the world's population will live in cities. So, this reality has an enormous influence on the human psyche. Perhaps we don't realize how urbanization has changed our inner psychology. You all know about the stresses, the strains, the anxieties that we practically accept now as normal. This is part of life. As people often say, when the stresses and strains become more obvious, at least where I was born in New York City, people just say, that's life in the city. That's the way it is. Is life meant to be in this way? We'll discuss that later. Let's consider looking at the Earth planet 200 years ago. If you were able to have a vantage point from outer space, if you looked at the Earth from outer space around 1850, what would you see? You would see just two beacons of light that indicated cities of more than 1 million. That would be just two concentrations of light, one from London and one from Beijing. Now, if we look at the Earth from outer space, how many concentrations of light will we see? Indicating urban areas of more than 1 million persons. We'll see 450. So these facts have enormous bearing on our internal situation. And again, I'd like to stress that we should consider these geophysical realities as having an enormous impact on our internal condition. Everyone knows how the population is supposed to expand. By the middle of this century, it's calculated that you'll see the end result of adding 7 New York cities to the population every year. So by the middle of this century, you'll have added the equivalent of 2 Chinas to the population. So, this enormous pressure upon the Earth, everyone knows, has tremendous ramifications. The resources that the Earth supplies are limited, and the space that the Earth provides for disposal of waste, once those resources are processed, that's limited too. But the human desire seems to be unlimited. It seems that Human beings today cannot be satisfied with anything for long. And not only that, but often it is perceived to be a fault if you are satisfied minimally. Simple living seems to be a great fault. It seems that you're behind the times. Cave person, cave dweller. We've lost something along the way about our internal wealth, the richness of our internal being. We've dealt with some myths that have characterized a brain-dead society. There are 4 basic myths that we are reaping the results of. Myth number 1, money brings happiness. Myth number 2, technology brings well-being. Myth number 3, weapons bring security. And myth number 4, the earth gives us unlimited resources for our utilization. So these myths have led to a situation in which it's difficult for people to think outside the box. The habit energy of the daily life has so much consumed us. Yes, you could say our consumer society has consumed us, leaving very little headspace to consider the wider situation, leaving very little headspace for planning outside the box. What we're going to be getting at in this discussion is that we need a different kind of culture. And now is the best time for considering these points, because everyone can see that our institutions, political, economic, cannot cope with the complex problems affecting the world today. The problems are so interlocking, so interrelational. You can't just tackle one problem without dealing with 10 others. And, like the Hydra, you think you've cut off the head of one problem, 10 other heads take its place. So what is going on? Why not consider that our economic and political problems are showing a human problem? Our institutions can't cope because human beings can't cope. Many persons can see that our institutions are not able to handle the complexities of the day. But people seem to be hesitant about recognizing that institutions are formed by human beings. So an institutional problem reveals a human problem. It's quite obvious that the interrelationships, the holistic nature of the problems today overpower our institutions. You have, on the one hand, corporations which just consider the next financial quarter or two and make their decisions in that way. You have political institutions staffed by persons who just think about their 2, 4, 6, whatever years in office. So, where do we find the broad, all-inclusive vision for how to deal with the problems of today? Whether it's climate change, or the Middle East, or economic instability, boom and bust economies, People are in such anxiety, even though they live in technologically advanced societies. They don't know what will tomorrow bring. The certainty of the so-called good old days is gone. So perhaps we should consider that beyond our surface, peripheral advancement, there's a lot of inner turmoil, even inner decay. How do we design a human culture that can actually benefit human beings? We can see that there's so much duress, so much pressure today. We spoke about economic instability, ecological instability, social alienation, political incompetence. It seems that all these are converging at once to produce a universal sense of unease about whether we can actually get it together anymore as human beings, whether individually or collectively. Where is it that we've gone wrong? Today I'd like to propose to you that we take a look at the ancient wisdom culture presented in the yoga text. People generally consider yoga to be all about physical postures, breathing exercises. But what we're presenting today is that the ancient yoga culture is about knowledge and applied knowledge. Perhaps there is something more that we can be getting from the yoga text than just physical postures and breathing. Perhaps we can get insights into a reshaping of human society based on other principles than just production and consumption. Let me bring up one point. Let's consider, is economic development a true symptom of human intelligence? This is the challenge that yoga texts such as Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam raise. Perhaps we have just flattered ourselves, or we have been flattered, so that we think because there is technological proliferation, because there is economic activity, we must be advanced. Let us dare to consider that the opposite could be true. As we look at the multidisciplinary, interrelational problems of today, which can't be tackled, as we said, just by addressing this problem over here, that problem over there. Perhaps we should consider that perhaps our society is not advanced. Now, what does advancement really mean according to the ancient yoga text? Internal development, internal wealth. A truly advanced person, according to the Bhakti yoga text, can externally live simply while internally has so much wealth, a wealth of non-material understanding and experience. Sometimes it is said that to deal with the problems of today, we have to turn people away from the production consumption monster and get them to increase their natural capital. That means increase their appreciation of nature and their time in nature. And to increase their social capital. That means get people to develop relationships more and learn how to relish relationships more. And that way, you'll lessen their impact on the environment, upon one another. Because the artificial stresses and strains of a consumer society not only are destroying the environment, but they are destroying the people themselves. Just consider increasing the nature capital, increasing the social capital. Can that really work if the people themselves cannot control their mind and senses? Being able to control the mind and senses is actually the basis of yoga. Someone who doesn't have control of their mind and senses will simply cause commotion after commotion, disturbance after disturbance, no matter what situation you put them in. When we recognize that the real enemies we should be considering are those within, then we can see the real territory for conquest. A life of uncontrolled mind and senses has become so normal that it's glorified these days. So much so that people think, how can you enjoy life through sense control? Isn't it normal to have an uncontrolled mind and senses? A consumer society is based on a lack of mind and sense control. Therefore, people have forgotten the wealth that can be generated internally by a lifestyle of mastering the mind and senses. So that mastering of the mind and senses is the basis of a wisdom culture. Because without a controlled mind and senses, who would be interested in wisdom? That's why often it is said, ignorance is happiness, ignorance is bliss. What you don't know won't hurt you. Just act according to how you feel. Act according to what you think will make you happy at the moment and leave it at that. That's life. To get at the root of the problems affecting human society today, let's go past the institutional failures of political incompetence, the economic unpredictability, the climate change situation. Let's get past all that and let's finger the real culprit. The real culprit is the human being who lacks self-knowledge and self-control. Those two things go hand in hand, because unless we have self-knowledge, why would we be interested in self-control? So the basis of a wisdom culture, if we want to get away from the brain-dead society, the basis of a wisdom culture is knowledge of the self. So the yoga texts, especially Bhagavad Gita, present, first of all, the self as non-material. Once we understand that the self is non-material, our core being is non-material. By core being, I mean what doesn't change, although the body and mind are always changing. This is the first lesson Krishna teaches in Bhagavad Gita, that everything is changing. Our environment is changing, our body is changing, our mind is changing, but there's something about your core identity that doesn't change, although everything else has changed. So once we understand that we have a core non-material essence, then we can start to think about what will fulfill us. You see, whether we think about it or not, and most persons don't think about it, if we don't know an identity beyond material, naturally then, we're simply going to pursue material gratification. So that's what you see going on today. Some people have some intuition. I think I'm spiritual. In my travels around the world, and I've been doing it for 40 years on every continent, I informally do my own surveys. And I ask people, do you think that you are just matter? Very few persons will subscribe to that. Most persons say, well, I don't know. And then a lesser amount will say, I think I'm both material and spiritual. A very few persons will, and it's surprising, very few persons will actually say, there's nothing to me but matter. That's all that there is. Our lack of precise understanding of what is a self leads to extraordinary problems. Not understanding our non-material identity, we're simply condemned to try to enjoy matter as our main mission in life. And that drive to exploit and enjoy matter is what is damaging the earth and damaging our psyche. So what the yoga texts, especially Krishna's teachings in Bhagavad Gita, address is that once you understand your non-material identity, then you can understand your non-material desires. In other words, there's no way that the non-material self can be fulfilled and satisfied through material desires. An example to reveal that impossibility. Your car needs petrol. You drive into the petrol station and you go up to the pump and you take the hose and nozzle and you stick the nozzle in your mouth. Start to drink the petrol. Everyone knows petrol is meant for the car, for the petrol tank of the car, not for you. You cannot distinguish between the driver of the car and the car. So you start drinking the petrol, thinking it's all one and the same, the driver and the car. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna points out that the body and the mind of the living entity are like a vehicle. And the driver is the non-material self. And that non-material self cannot be fulfilled or satisfied by what you do to the vehicle. The non-material self needs its own means of fulfillment and satisfaction, which are non-material. Just like you cannot be fulfilled by drinking petrol, it's meant for the vehicle. Similarly, you cannot be fulfilled by material endeavors for happiness that apply simply to your body and mind. So this is a very deep-cutting solution for human problems which are actually unnecessary. So that is why at the very beginning of the Bhakti Yoga system, knowledge of the self is emphasized. Because unless we have a clear understanding of what we are, then how can we proceed to truly satisfy ourselves? So in other words, when you look at society today, you're seeing human beings that don't know what to do with themselves. In spite of such complexity and sophistication, still, they have no idea how to fulfill themselves. And therefore, so many unnecessary problems are generated. Economic problems, political problems, environmental problems, all leading to system-wide failures And this is what human beings are becoming more and more aware of. System-wide failures at all levels of human affairs, whether local, national, international, social, political, ecological. It's quite ironic that we have more technological capacity than ever before. Yet it seems we don't know how to govern ourselves wisely or manage the planet holistically. In other words, if we cannot deal with ourselves as individuals, how can we deal with the world? So what I'm proposing today is a different kind of society. And perhaps we should consider that our recent traditions, as well as recent or current modernity, lack something that ancient knowledge could give us. It's humbling to dare to consider that perhaps the ancient yoga texts present to us the most valuable information. So many persons practice yoga in terms of the physique. But just think, if we would go deeper into that yoga knowledge, beyond the body exercises, beyond the breathing, we might find a vast treasure chest of information that is so precious and valuable for human society. So that's what I would like to point out today. Let us dare to consider that our most important aspect of the self is non-material, and therefore our most important needs are non-material. So this is what Krishna in Bhagavad Gita educates us about. How can we be internally at peace if we're identifying externally? We'll never know how to manage our desires as long as we consider ourselves to be material. You may be wondering at this point that, okay, you say that there is this knowledge that we are non-material. How can I verify that? Is this just some kind of belief? Is this just some kind of intuition? How do I verify my non-material identity? Let me answer that by saying, not only do the Bhakti Yoga texts present the knowledge, but also the techniques for verifying that knowledge. I often mention, and those of you who have heard me speak here at Melbourne Uni before, you know that I point out in the entire Bhagavad Gita, the prime yoga text, nowhere does Krishna ask you to believe. Everywhere in Bhagavad Gita you find Krishna saying, here is the technique for verifying what I have said. Here is the spiritual technology. Here is the procedure once you enter the spiritual laboratory. This is what's going to go on. If you do the experiment right, this is what you'll get. If you do the experiment wrong, this is what you'll get. We're talking about wisdom and applied wisdom. That is the greatest wealth. How will the world possibly be changed? It can't, as long as people have no control over their mind and senses. And it's impossible to control your mind and senses unless you know what is your identity. Without proper, correct self-knowledge, you'll go on driving into the petrol station and sticking the nozzle in your mouth and drinking the petrol. And causing so much havoc to yourself and the world in that way. with a proper understanding of what is the self, we then get the necessary information for shaping our lifestyle. Let's consider that so much of our current problems as individuals are because we don't know what is a proper lifestyle. We're busy drinking the petrol that should go for the car, for the vehicle. We are trying to fulfill ourselves, satisfy ourselves. And that seems to be quite natural. Sometimes people protest that, hey, what do you want? What do you want me to do? What do you want out of my life? I'm just trying to be happy in my own way. I'm just trying to get some peace, trying to get some pleasure. What do you want? But you see, the human form of life with its advanced consciousness gives us an advanced responsibility beyond what the animals have. The animals, they are better at material activities than human beings. The animals don't get neurotic and they don't stymie themselves over material activities of how to get food, how to sleep, how to have sex, how to defend themselves. They do all these things, as you would say, quite naturally. But when a human being wastes the developed consciousness that the human form of life is, wastes it on these rudimentary material activities, this is a great loss. The human being cannot be satisfied. So the yoga texts present a program for meeting head-on the advanced consciousness of the human form of life. But as long as we have a culture that's dedicated to consumerism and external gratifications, we'll never be able to tap into that inner wealth of the human form of life. So we need a different kind of knowledge, and then we'll have a different kind of culture. So yes, I'm talking about spiritual knowledge, spiritual culture, but not in terms of belief. I'm talking about knowledge and applied knowledge, wisdom, and then acting on that wisdom so that we actually get a deep experience of the non-material reality. This is what Krishna is offering us in Bhagavad Gita, and the basis of Bhakti Yoga, particularly, which is known as the pinnacle of the yoga system. The basis of Bhakti Yoga is how to connect to the ultimate source. And in that way, we won't experience such chronic deficiencies as we are today. We're experiencing deficiencies without and within. And meanwhile, we're working so hard, we're struggling so hard at university, at the workplace, at home. Everything has become such a struggle. It's time to consider that we need a different kind of culture. The kind of person that can bring about such a transformation is not impossible. Let's look at the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna explains that every social body needs a head. What is the true head of a social body like? That the social body has a head doesn't mean the other parts of the body are unnecessary. You have arms, you have legs, but still you know, the head is the most important part. So what is, as Krishna describes, the head on the social body? It's those persons who are dedicated to wisdom and applying wisdom as their topmost aspiration, as their main career in life. These kind of persons can't be bought off. You may notice these days how everyone has their price. I was speaking recently in Mumbai, India, at the Bhava Institute of Nuclear Research. Gathered there were the finest nuclear scientists of India for study, for research. So I was explaining to them that science is a human affair. And unless humans are truly advanced, how can their science actually turn out to be truly advanced? They were a little doubtful. No, our procedures are expert. They were speaking about nuclear energy. We've got everything figured out. All the possible hazards are rendered obsolete. So I pointed out that, because human beings have devised the technology, whether it's nuclear or whatever, and because human beings are operating technology, unless you solve the human problem, you're still going to have problems. I gave them an example. I said, let's take the world's most profitable corporation, ExxonMobil, which in 1 year will, in terms of profits, clear profits, reap more than $50 billion a year. Clear profits. So, did you know that ExxonMobil has a relatively tiny slush fund of a few $1 million? And that slush fund was meant for encouraging environmental scientists to deny global warming. So they were offering prizes, $50,000 for the first published essay in a peer-reviewed journal. That, as they put it, it doesn't repudiate climate change, but produces the necessary doubts. When pulled up straight about this, the ExxonMobil people said, well, look, we're just trying to encourage open-minded science, that's all. And we're just trying to balance the situation. So many people are talking about climate change, so many experts. We're just trying to create a balanced picture by offering economic stimulation to those who will present a contrary view, that's all. I was speaking to these nuclear scientists at the Bhakti Institute of Nuclear Research because they had presented to me that the human factor in science is not so important. So I said to them, after explaining about ExxonMobil and how they were seeking to change opinions about climate change by offering economic rewards to academics, to scientists. I said to these nuclear researchers, what would you do if ExxonMobil knocked on your door and offered you $50,000 for an essay? Would you refuse? They all looked down on the floor. $50,000 in India? I asked, would you refuse? Or, what do you think if you mentioned to your wife what she would say? Again, everyone looks down the floor. So, my point is, people can be so easily bought off. Everyone has their price these days. What you study at the university, most of the time, is because of economic ramifications. I've got to get a job when I graduate. Yeah, that's true. So I should study what brings a rewarding income. So my knowledge quest is financially based. I don't know about Australia, but I know in New Zealand, where I'm based most of the time, the Ministry of Education makes its position quite clear. On its letterhead, so to speak, masthead, it is stated that the purpose of education is economic enhancement. So, this mission statement has enormous ramifications. You learn what brings the money. Now, that kind of approach to knowledge has caused so many problems for human beings because they don't know what is the self, and therefore they'll never know how to satisfy the self. And then a human being ignorant of the spiritual nature will proceed to cause so many problems in the external world. So unless we know the non-material root of the situation, we'll never be able to solve the problem. And therefore you have a situation today in which everyone has their price. There's a price on everything. As one commentator said, these days people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Real value is the non-material dimension. But we actually need the technology for verifying that non-material dimension. Because it's a non-material dimension, the techniques for verifying it are non-material. So here is the clash, here's the problem. Those who are addicted to matterism, saying that matter is all that matters, they reject out of hand any non-material techniques for verifying the non-material reality. They say, if we're going to verify something, we have to use material techniques. But it's impossible to use material techniques to verify the non-material dimension. But that doesn't mean that there's no non-material dimension. So what Krishna offers in Bhagavad Gita are non-material laboratory techniques confirming the Bhakti wisdom, the knowledge of the non-material self in relation to the non-material Supreme Self. So it's a different kind of knowing, a different kind of technology. That it's different, though, doesn't mean it has no existence. So now is the time for us to consider a different way of being. But that different way of being has to be based on wisdom. Otherwise, we'll go on in our current brain-dead society, although there is so much economic, political complexity, still we wonder, from where will the competence come? Why are we so unable to deal with the challenges of today? And the challenges are increasing, and increasingly more complex and interrelated. And it's quite obvious that our systems can't handle that. Our current systems are not designed to deal with such interlocked, interrelated complexity. What to speak of the leaders who staff those systems, and what to speak of the people who elect those leaders, the people who are subject to those systems and leaders. We need to make a deep change. As one economist at Stanford University said at the beginning of the global financial crisis, he said, "A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. A crisis presents extraordinary opportunity for change." So therefore, in our current human crisis, we can consider how to have a different kind of culture, a wisdom culture, and brings about a wisdom culture are persons who are dedicated, as Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, to controlling the mind, controlling the senses, dedicated to wisdom and applied wisdom. Such persons can't be bought off. They can't be bribed. They can't be motivated to act in unhealthy ways based on their having inappropriate desires. Such persons are practically fortresses unto themselves because they are internally balanced, internally fulfilled. They are wealthy inside, and they can live simply in terms of their external. These are the kind of persons that can most affect world change. These kind of persons can bring about such a difference in the world. So that is the contribution of the Bhakti Yoga science as Krishna presents in Bhagavad Gita, as is presented in the graduate study to Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. A reorientation of the entire human society based on recognizing the non-material self and the non-materiality as primary, not supplementary. You can make a shadow, but your shadow is not primary. You would consider yourself as the substance. Similarly, we should not consider the shadow world of matter and our material coverings of the body and mind as primary. The wisdom culture will give people the knowledge of what is the self, what is the supreme self, and the relationship between the two. What is consciousness and what is the source of all consciousness? These are topics that Krishna deals with extensively in Bhagavad Gita. So in conclusion, let me say that to establish a wisdom culture is not a fantasy, it is possible. What is required are just a few persons who are willing to be exemplars of discipline in terms of using their advanced human consciousness to rise to the highest level. Persons who are dedicated to the internal wealth, who want to increase their internal resources. Such persons can be satisfied in any kind of external situation, and they can't be bought off. As we said, everyone these days has their price. It's just a question of how much. Because people are empty within, they can easily be manipulated by external forces. But if someone is wealthy within, they can withstand any challenges. They're self-sufficient in terms of their enjoyment in life. This is a program that Krishna espouses in Bhagavad Gita. By learning to be happy within, that means based on the non-material self, you can withstand all challenges in life, and you can easily be satisfied and content in any situation. Therefore, your ecological footprint will be less, your stresses and strains incurred by trying to fulfill yourself externally, that will all be reduced. And because your life is based on wisdom, you'll actually be able to make the greatest contribution to yourself and to the world. So, in conclusion, please consider, how can we train and develop persons of this kind of internal fiber, internal character, not based on religious belief or sentiment, but based on actual practical experience of the spiritual reality. Persons who are wealthy internally. So that is the greatest need in society today. Otherwise, we'll see no change. We'll see no difference other than what we have today. The change has to begin within. And then you'll start to see a change without. All right, thank you very much for your time and attention. Perhaps there are some questions. Yes. I purposely did not. Yes, in case you didn't hear. I've referred to the simple life many times. How do I describe a simple life? I purposely didn't get into that because I wanted to stress that once we become internally wealthy, then automatically our external situation will become simplified. By our external situation becoming simplified, I meant that we won't spend so much effort of our life trying to be happy and fulfilled by interacting with what's around us, whether in terms of economics, politics, or the environment. We won't have such a injurious effect on the environment because we're not looking to nature as the supplier of unlimited resources for our unlimited desires. Our interactions with persons and nature will change because we know how to be internally content based on spiritual techniques. You'll see a different kind of human being. Automatically, your external interactions will become reduced. But because we're empty inside, we put so much stress on the externals. Just think about it. So many external avenues we drive down, seeking to be happy and fulfill ourselves. You require other persons to gratify you. You require other things to gratify you. The whole world is meant to provide things and persons for your enjoyment. This is a heavy burden. And the world can't go on like that. But no one can stop it. And this is what environmentalists are so concerned about today. People can't stop what they're doing even when they know that things can't go on in this way in terms of humanity's interaction with the environment. The knowledge is there, but no one can control their senses. Any other questions? Well, it's always a pleasure to speak at Melbourne Uni. It's one of my favorite places on the planet to speak at. I find the audience to be very thoughtful and giving of such fine consideration. So I thank you very much.